Okay, so let me just welcome everyone here tonight. This is our Fall into OBOB event series. My name is Julie, and I'm the events manager at Roundabout Books in beautiful Bend, Oregon. It's just to remind everyone, this event is being recorded. So if you don't want to be on video, you can turn off your video function, but we'll still be able to hear you when you ask a question later, or you can put it in the chat. And then just remember to stay muted so we're not interrupting our wonderful author who's going to talk tonight. While we're getting started, I'd love to hear who is doing OBOB for the first time. So if you want to pop into the chat, let us know the city you're in or maybe the school you go to. We just love hearing that people are joining OBOB because it's just such a fun program and that you're here with us tonight. So we are very excited, as some of you may have heard, to talk to Carlie tonight about her book, Leonard, My Life as a Cat. I have my copy right here that I was working on reading on my lunch today. Love seeing everybody's books. So let's talk about this for just a second. So he's not a stray house cat. He's an immortal being, and now he must choose whether to return to his planet or remain with his new human friend in a humorous, heart-tugging story from the author of Cosmo. So Carlie Sorosiak is the author of middle grade novel Cosmo, as well as two novels for young adults, If Birds Fly and Wild Blue Wonder. She is joining us tonight from Atlanta, Georgia. So everyone, please, we can do this. Give a little round of applause for Carlie, and she's going to talk about Leonard, My Life as a Cat. I turn it over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and letting me chat with you tonight. So as we know, I'm an author. I've written a few books like Leonard, My Life as a Cat, which is about an alien who travels to Earth and he gets stuck in the body of a cat. And I think that at least some of you have read Leonard or maybe are going to be reading Leonard. So I'm really looking forward to questions at the end. You can ask me anything you want about either the book or cats or what it's like to be a writer. I think we already had one question. Is it pronounced Leonard or Leonard? And it is pronounced Leonard. And that was actually my grandfather's name. My son's name is Leo. My dad's middle name is Leo. My grandfather was Leonard, and his father was Leo. So there's a lot of Leonards and Leos in the family, but it is Leonard. That's a good question. But at the end, you can ask me anything you want about the book or cats or what it's like to be a writer. And firstly, I have a question for you. Can I have a show of hands? Who has a dog at home? Okay, some people have dogs at home. Who has a cat at home? Okay, cats at home as well. Does anyone have any other animals like a hamster or guinea pig or rabbit? Anything like that? Does anyone have really interesting names for their pets? If you have any interesting names for your pets, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay, someone has chickens. I love that. And we'll see if anyone has any additional names. So we have some animal fans in the room, and I'm sure that you've learned quite a lot from your animals. Right now, I have a dog named Danny who's actually sleeping in the next room, and she has something called an American Dingo. So she's basically a wild dog, and she teaches me something every day. And you might have guessed this, but I also have a lot of cats in my life. So right now, I have 162 cats, but we will get to that in a second. But that is true. I have 162 cats. Another question for you all. Anyone want to be a writer when they're older? So someone's still stuck on the 162 cats. I can't believe it. We'll get to that. But yes, anyone want to be a writer when they're older? Great. So if you do want to tell stories, I think that you can take inspiration from all sorts of things that happen in your life, especially when it comes to animals. So when I write, I usually start with an animal, like a cat called Leonard, or even Cosmo, the golden retriever. And then I try to learn everything I can about that animal. Things like most cats that are outdoor cats actually look both ways before they cross the road if they are female cats. But if they're male cats, they just go. They just wish themselves the best and just go across the street. Or there was once an experiment in Belgium in the 1800s where 37 cats delivered the mail. They thought it was a fantastic idea to just attach little bags to the necks of cats and put letters in them and then just see if they could find their way home. And it was super successful. And then they never did anything with it. So that's really interesting. Another thing about cats that I really, really love is people think that when cats are clawing, that they're actually sharpening their claws. What they're doing instead is they're pulling off the outer sheath of their claws to reveal even scratchier claws beneath it. That's pretty cool. Dogs. Dogs are awesome. Dogs can actually smell emotions. Their noses are so good, they can smell things like sadness, they can smell fear. They smell the entire world through their noses. So if you went outside to a swimming pool and you dropped in a teaspoon of sugar, so like a little itty bitty bit of sugar into a swimming pool and stirred it all up, a dog could come by 3 days later and smell the sugar in the pool. That is how amazing their noses are. Other things that I've learned, rats can giggle. I don't know if anyone has rats as pets. I know someone has a cat named Willow. And someone has a dog named Apollo, dog's named Chandler. That's pretty cool. If anyone has rats, I used to have rats called Ziggy and Miss Mellow, and rats can actually giggle. So if you tickle their tummies, they can giggle. Anyone ever heard of wombats? Do you know what wombats are? Yeah, they're kind of like, they almost look like giant guinea pigs. But my favorite fact about wombats is they poop in perfect cubes. Their poop is cube shaped. You might not want to Google that, but you can. So I spend a lot of my day thinking about animals and what it must be like to be those animals. So of course, Leonard's character is a little bit trickier because he isn't really a cat. He's kind of a cat. He's an alien in the body of the cat. So he's sort of half and half. Does anyone believe in aliens? Yeah, okay. Well, at least at least one person believes in aliens. I completely believe that aliens are real. There's just too much out there in the universe that we don't know. Statistically, I think that it has to be possible. Whether or not they look like cats is up for debate. And maybe we can unmute a couple people for this but I have a question. What would you do if you found out that your pet was an alien? If for example, Willow or Apollo or Chandler was an alien, would you be scared? Yeah, let's go to Jace.
Jace, go ahead.
Yeah. I would just be a little freaked out that my dog is an alien. Um,
I yeah.
but I, I don't know what I would do.
I think that that's a very fair response. I think we might all be a little freaked out at first, but it could be pretty cool, I think. I think personally, if I found out that one of my cats was an alien, it wouldn't surprise me at all. If my dog was an alien, I might be a little surprised. I don't know. I don't know why. But how did I come up with the idea for Leonard? So I had just written a book called Cosmo, and it was from the perspective of a dog. And I thought to myself, okay, what comes next after dog? Cat. I have a dog book, then I have a cat book. But I was also toying with the idea of, like a really, really friendly alien. And I thought to myself, what if? What if I just combined the two? So like alien cat into alien cat. And that's how Leonard, the alien cat, was born. I also truly believe that we should listen to the animals. But the trick is like we have to understand what they're saying. So in the book, Leonard kind of talks with the help of a typewriter and the occasional crayon. But it doesn't have to be as obvious as that. Like if you have animals, animals are talking to us all the time. They speak with their entire bodies and they say it really, really loudly. They tell us if they're happy or anxious or sad. So, for example, if a cat's kind of like hunched over, their tail's up really high and it's puffy, we know that they're pretty afraid. But if they're on their back and they're showing you their belly, that usually means they trust you. And sometimes this is a trap. Sometimes it's a trap if they're just, exposing their belly to you. But, that's in biology, when they're exposing, someone has tailless rats. That's amazing. Sorry, I just saw that. Yes, Casey has tailless rats.
They're actually guinea pigs, but they look like tailless rats.
Yes. I was wondering if they were guinea
He's
pigs.
my dad.
Oh, wait a second. I think one of them is about to join us in the back. So cute. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. So if they're showing you your belly, that's where all of their like vital organs are, and that means they're vulnerable. So if they're vulnerable, they're trusting you. They're saying, I know you won't hurt me. So I have so many cool cats in my life. A little earlier, I said that I had 162 cats in my life, and that is true. So if we could go to the PowerPoint for a second, I want you to meet some of them, and I will explain how I know so many kitties. So these are some of the cats that I've met. So I work at a cat shelter, and our cat shelter is called Good Muse, like kitties. It is Georgia's only free roaming cat shelter, which means that the cats are not in cages. They roam around, they chat to each other, they interact. We have a kitten room, then we have a room for older cats, and then a room for cats that are newer, and then a room for cats that are sick. So we don't allow them to kind of mix with each other. I think that, yeah, so that's definitely some kittens. If you go to the next slide. These are two of my favorite kitties. The one on the left, his name was Angel, and she had a condition where she actually couldn't blink. She blinked like a lizard. Like her eyelids were always open, but cats have this really interesting like third eye that they kind of like close like this, like a lizard, but we had to put eye drops in her eyes every day. And then every other kitty that comes in, I'm just absolutely in love with. But if we go to the next slide, too. So on the left, the gray kitten, our gray kitty, is Patriot. And Patriot is basically like the mascot of Good Muse. So he was hit by a car when he was just a kitten, and he was returned to us. And now he's just living with us forever. So at the shelter, we keep the cats for as long as it takes them to get adopted. We've had some cats with us for about 10 years. On the right is Hillary. She used to give high fives. I love that. She's with a really, really great couple now. Let me do the next slide. This is my cat, Bella. So Bella is something called a polydactyl cat. So she has many, many toes, and sometimes they look like little mittens. But what's really great is she can grip pens, she can grip balls. They used to use these cats on ships because they are an exceptionally good at catching mice because they just have so many claws. But she's probably the sweetest and the smartest cat I've ever met. When I went to pick her up from her foster, she was able to get out of the room by jumping on the door and hanging on the doorknob and then pushing the door open with her weight. She's actually kind of a genius. Like it's a little bit scary, but Leonard was definitely partially inspired by her. Next slide, please. This is my dog, though. On the left was when she was a puppy, and on the right is now. So she was super, super small, picked up in the woods, now on the bed. Do the next slide. And this is her now. And this is where I write. This is where I write my books. So I just finished a book about a fox that will be out in October. And if you see the next slide, this is why I don't write as much anymore. I have a little baby boy. He's 11 months old. Again, his name is Leo. He really, really loves cats, but he's more of a dog person, I think. So that is the end of the slideshow with that. But writing about animals, I really love. It can be super fun creatively. So when we write, what is the main, does anyone know what the five senses are? Five senses. Could someone name some of them? And put it in the chat. See if we can get all of them. So we have sight, smell, hearing, Yep, sight again. Yep, sight, touch. We're missing one more. We're missing, yes, taste. Awesome, taste. So in fiction, when we're writing, we like to use all the senses, but as humans, we mainly rely on sight. And a lot of times that's what we talk about in books. But when you're writing about animals, animals might rely more on taste. They might rely on smell. If you've ever been on a walk with a dog, they try to put everything in their mouths. They're always sniffing things. And I think that's really interesting creatively to play up those senses. So I got to do a lot of that in Leonard, but I also got to write about other things that I really love, like road trips. Um, Turtle Beach, South Carolina is actually Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is where I used to vacation when I was a kid. The aquarium in there is the aquarium that I used to go to when I was a kid. Q is a real person. So I grew up with a Q. His name is actually Q. He's exactly like that. So maybe I'm actually not really creative. Maybe I just write about the things that I love as a kid and love now. And also Olive was just like me as a kid. I was also obsessed with animals, obsessed with animal facts and cats. So I want to talk a little bit about what led me to becoming an author. And I know I only have a few more minutes left before we want to get to questions, but I wanted to give a few storytelling tips too. So I wrote my first novel was not published, but between the ages of 9 and 12, which might be the age of some of you now. I was really enthusiastic about it. I worked on it almost every day. And at the end of it, I read it back as a whole, and I realized it had almost no plot. It was just a bunch of people really happily riding around on horses all day. But even so, I knew that I had the power to finish something. That's really, really important, is just finishing something. I also sent it off to a publisher called Scholastic, and they sent me back a really, really nice note saying that they weren't going to publish it then, but if I kept writing, maybe in the future, they would publish me. And actually, I had a book come out with Scholastic about 3 years ago. Now I'm on my, I think, 13th published book that's about to come out in March. So that's pretty cool. And it all started when I was 9 years old. There's a question. Can you explain about Norma? What about Norma? Do you mean, is Norma real? Is she a real person? I think I got Norma based on a TV show that I used to like to watch called Everwood. And there was this really awesome grandma character in there. And I love grandmas in fiction. And I just thought I really like Norma is the grandmother I think that I would have wanted, someone who's really, really resilient and tough, but also kind of has this gooey interior, grandma interior. So if you want to write a book one day, it's important, I think, to practice starting things and important to try to finish them. So even starting small with just a few sentences, maybe you could describe an animal that you really love, and then you can build it up from there. So how do you get ideas? How does anyone get ideas? I think authors are always asking the question, what if? So to begin with, werewolves. So if a werewolf bites you on a full moon, you will also turn into a werewolf. That's apparently a thing. But what if on a full moon, a werewolf is kind of like chewing on a chair? Like, does that chair transform too? Like, does it become a chair wolf? And what would a chair wolf look like if it morphs? I mean, things like this of just like, what if, what if, what if, over and over and over again. And so I just said, like, what if an alien was trapped in the body of a cat? And that's how I come up with the ideas. Did I always want to be an author? I was going to be a veterinarian, first off, but I actually went to school to be a spy. And I was recruited by the CIA, which is the Central Intelligence Agency. And I decided that I no longer wanted to be a spy after that because it was actually kind of scary. And I decided that I was going to write children's books instead. I think we have some questions coming in, and just answer one more thing. If I could be any animal, what would it be? I think I'd be very specifically my dog, Danny, because she's very spoiled. She loves to eat peanut butter, and she spends a lot of the day sleeping in the sun around the house. But I also think it would be super cool to be like a flying frog or an orca or an owl or a fox, and it's really difficult to choose. But that's definitely something to think about for yourself. If you could be any animal, what would you be? So if you liked Leonard, My Life as a Cat, or if you're reading right now, you might also like Cosmo, Cosmo, which is based on my dog, Ralphie. Oh, I think that someone's showing me a picture of a cat. Very nice. I like that. It's Leonard. It's very cool. Love it. Um, there's also Always Clementine, which is about it's about a mouse, but is based on my experience of having a lab animal living in my house. So when I was in kindergarten, my teacher was a member of PETA, which is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and she actually stole a rabbit from a research facility and brought it into the classroom. And my mom and I took it home, and it still had the research tag in its ear and everything, and that left a huge impression on me. I think someone's showing me Cosmo as well. Very cool. I saw that. So let's go ahead and get to the questions, a few of them. Ellie has asked, how many books have you written? I have written probably about 20 books, but 14 of them, 14 of them have or will be published. So a good number. Kylie has asked, what is your favorite book ever? My favorite book that I've written is probably Cosmo, actually. I really love that book. The favorite book that I've ever read, that's really tricky. My book club, my middle grade book club, just read Alone by Megan E. Freeman, and that is really, really fantastic. Can you show us Ralphie? So Ralphie, I do not have any pictures of him. So Ralphie was my childhood golden retriever. So he would be about 20 years old right now, which no, maybe older than that. Maybe older than that. So he'd be really old right now. But he was adorable. He was a British cream golden retriever, which means he's like white and really, really, really majestic looking. What is your favorite graphic novel? I really like, it's a graphic novel called Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. And it is about growing up in Iran, and it's fantastic. Yeah, I also like Heartstopper as well. Heartstopper is always a good choice. Who is your favorite author? Right now, I really love from middle grade Catherine Rundell. She wrote a book called Impossible Creatures, which is fantastic. I really love her book, The Explorer, is about a group of kids who get lost in the Amazon rainforest after a plane crash, and they have to figure how to get out of it. If you could have what inspired you to write Leonard? So I've always been interested in aliens and cats, and I just thought it would be really, really cool to put them together. And that kind of what if question of like, what if the cat was an alien? If you could have sorry, go ahead.
So Carlie, I guess we're going to get to some of these questions. I did want to ask one thing, like you're saying with a cat and an alien and talking about aliens being real. Do cats feel more alien-like because you can go back and find them in in Egypt in hieroglyphics and the Sphinx, and because they were so revered? Does anybody know about that? Like in Egypt back in the day, however long ago, like they thought cats were actually like divine beings, and they would bury their cats with them, and they would make sure that they were taken care of really well because they thought they were like not just cats.
Yep. So I actually have a book coming out next year called A World of Cats. And a few of the spreads are on cats in ancient Egypt. And there was a goddess in ancient Egypt who actually took the form of a cat. So when people saw cats, they thought, oh my gosh, that could be like the goddess. It could be her. And yeah, I think that, yes, exactly, Bassett. Yeah, perfect. We know our
You guys are
ancient
so smart. I just
heritage.
love this so much.
So that was definitely part of it. I think also there's something about like the huge roundness of their eyes and the fact that cats actually, their pupils are really interesting. They're actually more like alligators than they are like other sorts of mammals. Just based on the way they hunt, and they just feel there's just something like essentially ancient about them. And like they've kind of always been here, even though they haven't. But that's it. That's a really good question.
So there's some really fun questions in the chat, and I do think we should get to them, but let's do a couple more questions that are more Leonard focused so that this might help you with your OBOB competitions or just understanding the book. I always like to hear, and I know some people who were on our twins Zoom last week might want to hear, are there any things as you were revising Leonard and making some changes based on maybe an editor's help or some beta readers, are there some things that you had Leonard doing that maybe you had to take out for this version?
Um, so I worked with a really, really wonderful editor named Tom Bonnick, who is just one of my favorite people in the world. And he was always really good at not telling me what to do, but just kind of gently guiding me. And I actually didn't, this was one of my least edited books that I have ever written. And I actually don't know why. But he just wanted more of the relationship. So like more of Stanley, more of Norma, more of Frank, actually. I think that he, like before there wasn't as much of the relationship of Olive with her mom's boyfriend. So that was something that we added with him. But Leonard has always just been like a steady character. And I think what's really interesting about that is it's almost like he appeared to me and like he really exists. And everything that he did was just so clear in my mind. And actually, there weren't a lot of edits to that part of his journey, which now I'm thinking about that. I think it's pretty cool because my books get edited a lot.
Maybe the Egyptian goddess Bast was talking to you.
Yeah.
The other thing I kind of wanted to ask, and maybe we can throw it in the chat too, for people who have read other books where animals are the main character. So Catherine Applegate's The One and Only Ivan, One and Only Bob, Roseanne Perry's A Wolf Called Wander, A Whale of the Wild. There's a lot of authors who will try not to what is called anthropomorphize their animal characters. So I do it with my own pets, and everybody kind of thinks that, they'll laugh at me a little bit, where you think you give them the emotions of a human or the actions of a human that they might not really have. So how did you make Leonard a being within a cat without maybe anthropomorphizing him, but then also because he's not really a cat?
Yeah, and I think that was a really conscious choice on my part, and that was what was so tricky of like trying to give him enough cat-like characteristics, but also putting the alien. I think that the alien, what I pulled out of that was really just his intelligence, and I kind of made him like Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. That was, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that show, but I was like, okay, Sheldon Cooper inside a cat, and that was how I thought about that. But with the anthropomorphism, I always think is really interesting because I think that a lot of the things that we attribute to humans are actually universal. Things like empathy, things like the ability to love, things like grieving for people or other animals when they're no longer with us. And all of those things are attributed to cats. I also see a portrait of Willow that someone's done too. Very good. All those things can be attributed to cats and a variety of other animals, especially like mice, rats, dogs, apes. But it always something really conscious of, I don't want to make them too humanistic, but they are kind of like humans in a little bit. And I realized having a baby, and also working at a cat shelter, my baby was very similar to kittens. I mean, very, very, very like eerily similar to a kitten. And that's also partially the reason why we like kittens so much, is because they mew like babies. They have those big eyes and the round faces, and there's a lot of similarities there.
So we have a question of, why did Leonard like I Love Lucy?
I just thought that I Love Lucy was like this quintessentially human show. It has the family relationships. It's funny. I think it's simple enough to understand that an alien could come in and be like, ah, here it is. This is how you human. I grew up on a lot of classic television programs, and I always like to pull in things that I liked when I was the age of the characters, not however old Leonard is, a couple hundred years old, but yes.
It's also interesting to think of when, I think, was it in the 60s that they actually did beam like music out into
Yep.
the atmosphere. So if another race was out there, but they heard something that was so old, like he's watching I Love Lucy, which isn't current. So then maybe he has like, oh, this is how humans act. And we're like, oh, but that's not, because it's not the 50s and 60s. So it is that kind of funny, and also like black and white. And then we're all very in color.
Yes. There were
Yeah.
I think they were called the golden discs, and they kind of sent them out, and they had images of, automobiles and beaches, and they had Beatles songs and things like that. So I think I might have actually looked that up, and maybe I Love Lucy, there was like a clip or something. Maybe that's where I got it. It's hard. I think I wrote this book maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So publishing is a little bit slow. So
Yeah.
trying to remember where I was in that space.
And with the pandemic, time has moved in a weird way. So Isaac asked, how did you decide that Leonard wanted to be a Yellowstone Park ranger? I love that.
Yes. I just thought of a career that I might like to have. And I think the next question is, have you ever been to Yellowstone? I think these tie well together. I've never been to Yellowstone National Park. And when I was writing this book, I actually took tours virtually of the park. So I kind of felt in a way like I had been there a little bit, but I love national parks in general. I think that they are fantastic, fantastic places to connect with nature, and just to really kind of be one with the environment. And I was write about things that I would like to do myself, or that I find intrinsically interesting. And Yellowstone's one of our greatest national parks. I would love to visit. I also knew, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but if we haven't read it, but there's a part at the ending that's really important that has to do with the park. And I just knew it has to do with the geyser, if you've read it. And I just knew that that was going to be pivotal to the book. So part plot, part just I wanted to do that.
So Forrest, who I think has been on several of our Zooms, if I'm thinking of the right person, so thanks for coming back. How did you decide that Leonard wanted to be human? So of all the things his hive, picks, and we've talked about what animal you could be, why did he want to be human?
I think because we're human and I'm a human, I knew that humans were going to be reading this. So it was more applicable to say if you wanted to be a wildebeest, because you were kids and you were not wildebeests. So that was how I made that decision. Plus, I think that there's just so much you can do as a human, and so many desires that you can express and make sure that people know about. Also, if you're going to be an animal in America, unless you're going to be a dog or a cat, sometimes your life might be a little more challenging. Either you're going to be stuck in a zoo, or you're going to be stuck somewhere else, or you might have a more of a challenging time. So that was how I
Um,
did.
Jaden had a fun question/comment, but did you ever watch Alf? And if you haven't, you should. But Alf is mentioned in the book, so you and I might be of a similar age that we grew up watching Alf.
Yes, I've never seen it. But I mentioned a lot of things that I've never seen. So for example, in Cosmo, the whole book is based on the fact that he wants to do this dance to Greece, which is a movie I've never seen. I've never seen it. So there's E.T. I thought E.T. used to scare me. So I watched maybe the first like 15, 20 minutes and I was like, I can't take it. So I think I knew that they were gonna have to be separated at the end. And that made me sad. So
E.T. was the first movie I ever saw in a theater.
really?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's an old. So let's talk about your writing of Leonard.
Mhm.
So the paperback came out in 2020, which means the hardcover should have come out about 2019. But when did you actually write it? Like how long did it take you? What years, if you remember that you were working on it?
I don't remember what years I was working on it, but I remember it took probably about a year. And I also remember writing the last third of it in 2 days because that was very stressful. Yes, so I had a deadline that I was up against and I wanted to make sure that I made that.
Yeah.
Um, Normally I write, usually it takes me about a year to write a book. And I always just drink way too much coffee and then write the last of it very quickly.
So let's see here. Forrest did have a comment or a question of have you watched the Wild Robot movie yet? And if anybody just wants to raise their hand real quick, if you've read and watched it, it's really good. You should. Are you familiar with the Wild Robot by Peter Brown?
I am, and my book club is going to be doing it next month. So I'm very excited about that. And I hope that they do see the movie or see the movie ahead of time or afterwards. I haven't seen it yet, but I would love to. But that was
Yeah.
more me not being able to bring my baby into the movie theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so Lena asked a question as she said, they said, I was really sad when he left behind his raincoat with the pin on it. Why didn't he get it?
Um, I think that you know what? Why didn't he get it? That's a good question. I think that didn't the owl take it and then maybe they left it behind. I think it was just muddy and I thought it was just dramatic that they didn't take it. Yeah, maybe that's not a very good answer, but I to me it was just like, oh, it's muddy now.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's a symbol of the fact that this is a struggle for them.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to be able to take it with him anyway to where he was potentially going. So it was more of a metaphor of he's potentially moving on to a new part of his journey.
So we do have a question if there's any chance of a Leonard movie.
There is no chance of a Leonard movie. I think it would be very, very small chance. One of my other books is in talks for a movie, but
Um,
that would be pretty cool. But no, not for Leonard,
I
unfortunately.
think what would be really cool is to see some of our OBOB kiddos make their own little version of Leonard as a graphic novel.
That would
That
be
could be really interesting to take a couple of the scenes because after we talked about a graphic novel last week and kind of them learning about how those are storyboarded differently and what you have to pull out
Mhm.
as dialogue since you don't have narrative. It's pretty cool. They are asking which book is being turned into a movie, but I understand if maybe you can't talk about it yet.
It's actually so it's probably, and I hope it does actually go through, but it's going to be one of my books that I wrote for adults and
Mm,
is about a spy who comes home for Christmas.
very cool. You are multi-versatile. Um, let's see here. I kind of wanted to ask about so it from the beginning of it, and I will mention to everybody, and I mentioned this before, I'm only about halfway done with the book. My bad. Um, it feels a little bit like Olive and Norma aren't as close when they first get together, and then maybe the mom and Norma aren't as close. So talk a little bit about like your idea of that, like separation of the families and putting Olive in maybe an uncomfortable situation when she first meets Leonard.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I come from a family where I'm not very close with my grandparents, and that's something that I always wanted and always felt like when I went over to their houses, like, wow, I feel really uncomfortable. Like, what would it be like if we
Mm.
were actually really close? And that was a journey that I wanted to take Olive on. And I think that sometimes if you aren't really as close to your family, sometimes it doesn't really have anything to do with anything that's going on behind the scenes. It's just you haven't spent enough time
Mhm.
together. And so I wanted to give them enough time over the course of the summer to kind of connect, and for Norma to kind of peel back those layers a little bit. Again, I don't want to spoil it at all, but she is really like kind of like a porcupine. Like she's very prickly on the outside, but actually she has like this soft underbelly. So that was important to me to show that relationship and to actually give them like a fictional happy ending together.
Yeah. Um, Someone asked, is there maybe a sequel to Leonard?
I
Can
get
you?
this question all the time, and I would love to write a sequel to Leonard. I would absolutely love to. So there isn't one currently. But if my publishers let me write another one, I would definitely do that.
Um, so we had a comment on that same one is I love the I want to shave you part when she's
Yeah,
actually trying to say I save you.
I giggled so much when I was writing that.
Um, let's talk to just real quick a little bit. It's kind of the part I read today is when Olive tells him, Leonard, that she doesn't have a lot of friends and that Frank, who I understand maybe they get a better relationship towards the end, yay, but has mentioned that she, might be socially awkward. And as we're learning so much more about people having neurodivergence and not fitting into this, square peg, like, because
Yeah.
we might be a little bit more round. So talk about, I guess, your choice to make Olive a little bit of, I don't want to call her a social outcast, but she thinks she is.
Right. And this again was based on my experience of growing up, and just most of my best friends growing up were animals. My dog Sally, my dog Ralphie, my cat Bailey. I included them as some of my best friends. And it wasn't until I was older that I started actually finding who I would consider to be my people. And you're talking about, neurodivergence. I get this question all the time of, is Olive um neurodivergent? Is she on the spectrum? And that's really a question of like me, like am I? And I don't actually know. Like it's been suggested that I might be autistic by several doctors. Like maybe I am. I don't really know. But I love the fact that I'm able to kind of connect with people over that. And I think that it's just important to embrace all of your uniqueness, and that's what makes you who you are, and just continuing to be yourself. And you'll definitely find people who will see that as a beacon, and they'll have the same kind of um oddities as you do. So maybe there's someone else out there who really loves animal facts and really loves knowing about wombat poop. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually now we have a little bit of a question about Leonard's gender and whether or not aliens really do have gender. Now he's identified as he,
Mhm.
on the back of the book, maybe, in the book, but in his species as a hive mind, maybe that doesn't matter to them.
Yeah, I don't think that Leonard the alien has gender. I think that Leonard the cat has gender. And I tried to make that a distinction of as a hive, I think that they're just all kind of one being and they don't really care about gender at all. And then he's kind of stuck in the body of a cat and he's a male cat. So I don't know if aliens have gender or not. My aliens don't, but maybe other aliens do. Who knows?
And then one other question, which I love, is will you write a book about a bird?
I think that would be really cool. I think that
Yeah.
would be awesome. Yeah, I have mouse, dog, cat, fox, and possibly reindeer. Um,
Ooh.
but we'll see. I really wanted to write in a story about one of Santa's reindeers. we'll see if that actually happens.
I think that could be really fun.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great books out right now with animals as main characters, as I mentioned
Mhm.
before. And so you all have so much options to read about books with animals as the main character and learn about how animals do handle emotions like empathy. I think of A Wolf Called Wander, that's been an OBOB book before, and we all loved it. And those, wolves have a lot of those emotions and family dynamics, which I think is very, very cool.
Yeah.
So I think we will probably start to wrap it up. I did want to remind everyone there was a question in the chat. We'll have this on the YouTube channel for Roundabout Books. Usually I send a link. I didn't this last time because, again, we had an issue with the recording. But everyone, I want you to say thank you in the chat or by waving to Carlie for taking the time to talk with us tonight and to talk more about Leonard and just make us fall in love with him all over again. So thank you so much, Carlie, for being here. And this, as soon as I saw this on the OBOB list, I knew I had to at least read it and was hoping we could talk to you because we all love kitty cats. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Right.
And thank you everybody for being here. Good luck with your OBOBs and all of your reading, and just remember that books are just one of the best ways that you can find out more about everything that is in our world.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for reading the book. And yeah, cats are awesome.
Cats are awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording. Everyone